where did the month of September go? Hello everyone, my name is Bree and welcome back to my channel. I am going to talk about the books that I read in the month of September because this is the only time that I get to really just talk about books and things that I like or maybe dislike. So we're just going to jump into it. First and foremost, I really can't believe that September is already gone. We are into Preptober and spooky season, and soon enough, NaNoWriMo is going to come around the bend. But we are here, where we made it through September. I mean, this year's almost over. Thank goodness, right? In the month of September, I finally got away from reading my own work just a little bit. We were very heavy-handed in the beginning of September because I was planning to submit to Pitch Wars, so I was reading my co-written book, my Project Gold, as I was labeling it lately. So we kind of were going through that a little bit. I was reading through and editing a short story to submit to a literary magazine, and I was still working through my prophecy project, which has kind of taken a backseat based on deadlines coming up for other things. But despite that, I surprisingly made it through at least 4 books this month, and one that I'm not sure if I'm DNFing or not. I keep trying to make it through, but it's taken a while. So without further ado, let's just get into the books that I've actually read. First and foremost, we have The Thief by Megan Wallen Turner. Now, I can't remember if I actually included this in my last book or if I just mentioned that I started it, because I was almost done with it on the last day of August, but it still took me another day and a half to finish it just based on my schedule. However, this is the first book in I believe it's a 5-book series, and it spans like over 20 physical years, like our years this book series has been written. It started in like the 1990s, and the last book just came out relatively recently. But it follows a thief named Jen, who is supposed to be like the most well-known and notorious thief there can be, and he always jokes that, you know, he can steal anything. So someone ends up, in the beginning of the story, he's in jail, and someone pretty much takes him out of jail for the purpose of finding this artifact that is supposed to prophesy that anyone with the artifact will be the next ruler. So they employ him to get this artifact since he boasts that he can steal anything. It is a really well-written book, and I definitely get vibes, even though this is technically young adult, I get some of those older feel vibes, similar to like Game of Thrones, where you're in such a lush fantasy world, and for such a short book, I just really felt immersed in this story. I thought it was going to be a standalone, and I can definitely see that maybe this book was intended initially to be a standalone. So I'm not sure if I'm going to continue with the series anytime soon, but I really enjoyed it for what it was. With that said, I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was just a solid read. I don't really have opinions one way or another. I will say that I feel like I might have enjoyed it a little bit better if I was physically reading it, but I was listening to this on the audiobook. Nothing wrong with the narrator. I just don't think I realized that it was going to be a male perspective book. So when the male narrator started talking, it threw me off. And that's part of my own fault. I just keep picking up books with female narrators lately. But it took me a little while to get into the story, I think, because of that. So maybe if I just sat down and read this physically, I would have had a little bit of time. But that wasn't enough to knock down more stars or anything. It was just my enjoyment. So I gave this, it's a 4 stars. It's a solid read. Next on my list. Back in the end of July, I decided to make a TBR where my tarot cards chose my TBR, and I love the idea, except I don't execute TBRs very well because I'm the worst. However, I did pull the 3 of Cups, and I will... So the 3 of Cups is often associated with celebration, friendship, indulgence, and replenishment. So there's themes of dancing and socializing, family time, but basically it took me forever to finally read the book that I chose, which was The Last Time We Were Us by Leah Conan. So this book I chose for the 3 of Cups, and it was kind of following parties and romance and, you know, food and all of that. And I will say the 3 of Cups, like, this book fell in line with that. There was definitely a lot of parties. There was a lot of, like, small town gossip. Also, like, nouveau riche homes, which played a huge part in this, in like a North Carolina town. It was kind of bougie. There was a lot of cookouts, a lot of references to food. So the male protagonist, which isn't a point of view, but his name is Jason, and he gets charged with attacking one of the well-to-do family's oldest son. And because of that, he pleads guilty, takes a plea bargain, and goes to juvenile detention. And his best friend Leah has never really gotten over it, especially because she was always questioning whether she liked him more than just a friend when they were growing up, but she never got a chance to explore that. So now Leah is dating the younger brother of the boy that Jason supposedly assaulted. And it's kind of following her connection with this boy whose name is Innes, and then Jason, when he gets released from juvenile detention, coming back into her life and navigating those trenches of what will other people think of me if I go this route and what will make me happy. All in all, I gave this a 3-star. It was a good book, and honestly, it really helped get me out of a reading slump, and I think sometimes contemporaries are just easy to do that with. It's something that wasn't heavy-handed in any way, and it was a lighter contemporary, even though there were some serious topics talked about. But overall, it was good. I enjoyed it. It helped me out of that reading slump. One of the things that I had a problem with, and it might just be my understanding of the legal system in North Carolina, but in Pennsylvania, I work with a lot of kids who are on probation, who have been in juvenile detention or residential facilities for doing something wrong. Now, they specifically say that Jason wasn't tried as an adult, but they keep talking about him being on probation, and it's just interesting terminology, because as far as Pennsylvania goes, juvenile offenders don't have parole unless they're charged as adults, because the juvenile justice system tries to correct behavior rather than punish. Again, relatively in Pennsylvania. So it just kind of threw me off when they kept using these adult terms and like these adult ideas for kids, because maybe that's actually what happens in North Carolina. But for me and my knowledge, it was a little strange just because I work with kids who are in similar situations. So that kind of threw me out of the story. And like I said, the author actually says that she did research and she talked to people with connections in these justice system, but I don't know if it was juvenile or adult. But I give her credit for at least researching and not going in blind, because for the most part, it seemed pretty accurate. It was just some of those terminologies where it wouldn't actually be accurate if it was a Pennsylvania kid. But again, I understand that this does not take place in Pennsylvania, so I don't know if the laws are a little bit different around the juvenile system. Also, I didn't really hate the main character, but the other characters in this book treated the main character so horribly. And the main character just kind of accepted it. And that always bothered me, because I'm like, I just need you to have a backbone a little bit. And it was so hard, because I felt like she actually would have been a great character if the other people weren't terrible to her. So because they were terrible and she accepted it, there were a lot of times I just kept getting aggravated with her overall. But with that aside, I kind of liked her relationship with other people. I really hated her family, and the family parts were the weakest. Again, I'm sure it's accurate. There's definitely families who are like this, and it's upsetting just knowing my own family history and like the warmth that I had growing up. It definitely just seemed like this is a version of a life that I would be not happy in, so I can almost understand why the main character isn't happy, even though there's nothing relatively wrong. Like, she has like money and she's well off, but like it's that family dynamic part. But that being said, it sometimes bothered me how bad they were and how much they would never listen to her. And I'm like, in my head, as someone working with teenagers, I'm like, no wonder she's rebelling against you guys, because you're treating her like shit. Like, come on. So yeah, so it was more of just like my adult brain thinking, like, you could do better. Like, just go do you and live your own life. But yeah, otherwise there is talk about sex. It's a fade to black sex scenes. There's a couple of them in this book, but I like how normalized it is and how there's these questions. It's kind of like, like there's talk about losing virginity and there's talk about having sex multiple times, and it's relatively normalized in a healthy way. So it's not like promoting anything necessarily, but it's also not shying away, and I really liked how it did that. That being said, I think I talked about this book more than I intended, but 3 stars, good read overall. If you're looking for a light contemporary, I might suggest this. Next, we have Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. This was a novella-length book that I picked up. I believe the actual physical copy is only about 112 pages, so it was a quick read. And I picked this up because it was offered on Kindle, and I was like, this sounds good. I like the cover, and I was not expecting to love this as much as I did. I had no idea going in. It was completely blind. I didn't really even know much about anything. And oh my gosh, it was just so good. The writing was beautiful. I loved how immersive and atmospheric this book was, being only a novella. So let me back up. So this book, Silver in the Wood, essentially follows the very traditional sense of like the fae and the lore around like the man in the woods type of deal. So you have this man named Silver who has bought some like land in the town and is doing research on the fae. And you have another man who is kind of like this guardian in the woods. His name is Tobias, and Tobias kind of protects the woods and all of the creatures that live in it, both animal creatures and fae creatures such as dryads. It kind of just follows them as they start to know each other, and Tobias has to face his past and who he was 400 years ago and how that's impacting him now and his relationship with Silver. Personally, the floor was so fantastic and the environment was so fantastic. Honestly, I could gush. It was a 5-star for me. I absolutely loved it. Then I got even more excited because I just found out it was a duology and the second book just came out. So you are go to bed. I'm probably reading that very soon. But I highly recommend it, especially if you love fae in the traditional sense. No shade against Sarah J. Maas, but if you go for fae for like the sexy humanoid type of stuff, then go for her. But if you're looking more for that traditional fae lore, that there's consequences and they're not always pleasant to deal with, this is the book for you. Next on my list, and the last book that I fully finished in the month of September, is Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This I'm so excited because this officially counts as one of my bigger books read this year. I know at the end of the year I'm going to be doing a recap of all of the goals I wanted to achieve, but one of them was to read more 500-page or plus books, and we did it, guys. So this book is a continuation of The City of Brass, which follows Nari, Dara, and Ali. All these people who are essentially kind of finding out how they're connected to each other. Nari is a Cairo-born lady who kind of is a con artist and makes her living by conning people and healing them to some degree. She has aspirations to be a doctor, but she doesn't really have the money to do so, so she just tries to learn and pick up things as she goes. Nari ends up accidentally inciting an old Deva chant, and when she does that, Dara, who is a Deva, ends up being summoned, and he ends up taking her into Devabad, where she starts to learn that there's more to her than meets the eye, as well as this whole entire history that plays into her ancestry. That is pretty much book 1, and book 2 takes place 5 years later, and it did not let down. Another 5-star book for the month. I'm obsessed. I love this trilogy. I have one more book to read, and that just came out in June, so I know I can have it at my disposal, but it is such a good, solid read. It is adult fantasy, but I do believe it's super easy to cross over into YA if you read it. The political intrigue is a little bit more in depth than I would normally see in a young adult book, but it is very fleshed out. I love that Nari isn't a pushover, but she's not discompassionate either. Like, she has such a fine balance as a main character that I feel like it's so hard to see. She knows how to play the game. She knows when she should play the game, and she knows when she should follow her heart or listen to her common sense. I just think she's such a great character to follow, and I understand that, like, given these circumstances, sometimes she does have to make tough calls even though they're not exactly what she wants, and I love that. I also love that the other characters too kind of fall into this gray area where you want to root for them at some times, and then other times you're like, ooh, you're a bastard. No. So this cast of characters is so fantastic and refreshing to read from, as well as just the environments and the politics in the book as well. I'm obsessed with this series. I already know. I do feel like I'm going to read book 3 by the end of the year. I just don't know. I have a couple that I have lined up first, but I probably will get to this at some point soon, and I will be able to kind of, I don't think I'm going to do a series review fully, but then you'll kind of piece together because I read all of these books while on my channel then. So yeah, so look out for that. And the last book that I'm just going to mention is The Cyborg Tinkerer by Meg Latour. So this I got as an advanced copy back in July. I did fully request it. It sounded like something that I was going to be interested in. Essentially, this book takes place following a bisexual female character named Gwen who is about to die of a brain tumor when she's offered a chance to be turned into a cyborg that will save her life if she will work for this infamous circus. The circus is supposed to be banned. It's not really supposed to travel, and everyone kind of has this intrigue around it. While she's there, she ends up having a polyamorous relationship, or at least it's boasted as such, and she falls in love with a woman and a man. Now, the reason that I'm saying that I'm like working through it / DNFing it is because it's really just going lower and lower on my priority list. It kept hitting me in such a book slump every time I was trying to pick it up that I kept having to put it back to the back burner because I'm like, I'm not going to read anything if I keep reading this. Unfortunately for me, it's just a very difficult read, and it's not what I expected. I expected the circus to play a much bigger role, but it turns out that in the beginning of the book, the circus is being threatened to be disbanded, and because of that, they're doing this competition to kind of weed out the lesser cyborgs. So you really don't get the circus aspect, you get a competition aspect, which is all well and dandy, but just not what I expected. And also I have issues with the romances because I just feel like they're completely uneven, where the one romance is insta-love and it happens within the first chapter, I think, or something, the first 2 chapters. The second romance is much more dragged out, and it's kind of like a friends to lovers, but it just feels uneven. And then it is polyamorous in a way because they're both they're both connected to one girl, but they don't love each other. So I felt like that was a missed opportunity where you could have had a relationship where all 3 of them were literally in a relationship rather than one girl has 2 partners. So it's just a few things that just for me don't work. I think this would have great appeal to some people, especially because it is heavier on the eroticism side of the fantasy. If you like explicit sex scenes, a la Sarah J. Maas's books, then this might be up your alley. For me, the writing style didn't work, and I felt like things were being presented and weren't explained. Which leads me to my 2-star rating. I am rating it because I'm still working through it, but I also wanted to get my review up. I'm over 50% in the book, which is why I feel like I can justify my rating. I do intend to finish it before it comes out, just in case, then I can tweak my review if things change. But at this point, I've read a lot, and I'm still not satisfied. So that's kind of where I'm at. Normally, I wouldn't do this. I don't really like reading books unless I finish it, which is, again, why I'm going to try to finish it. But I did want to just kind of let you guys know where I'm at, because this was a book that I was given for review, and that's where I'm at. I'm very sad. I wanted to love it, but I just don't see myself loving it, even just based on what I've read already. I have a lot of problems just as a reader. So, yeah, it is what it is. Otherwise, I am already in the middle of some other great books, and I can't wait to review them in October and share them with you guys. I don't know what hit me this year, but like Halloween's my favorite holiday. I just haven't been in the Halloween mood the last couple years. And even though it's in the middle of, what's happening in the world, the spooky season is just with me right now. And I am like totally into gothic and horror and creepy fantasy and creepy contemporary and mystery. And I'm loving everything I'm reading so far. So I can't wait to share it with you guys next month. But otherwise, that's going to be it for the review that I have. Let me know down below if you've read any of the books that I have, if you're interested in any of the books that I read, and if not, what books did you read? What were your favorites for the month of September? And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.